Hi everybody, Rad Mom here. Welcome back to the garden, my happy place to talk about scary things. Accordingly, today on Garden Chat, we're going to be discussing the rollout of the new changes to Title IX and Affordable Care Act legislation that go into effect today. And if you don't know about what's going on with that, don't worry, we have Ty Turner, the professional trans man here, to tell us all about it.
Today we're talking about the new national protections for trans people and what they really mean for us on this episode of Huge News.
We're going to obviously see a lot of loaded language in this video because this person, has a bias that they're not going to disclose, which is that they believe wholeheartedly in the idea that trans people exist because they are one. I used to believe that about myself too, which is why I'm here to tell you that that's nonsense.
The Biden administration just passed national protections for trans people with updates to Title IX and the Affordable Care Act.
My understanding is they actually did this months ago, and it's actually going into effect now at the beginning of August. Why would that be? What's that targeted at, do you suppose?
So what does that mean for us? Well, Title IX is a federal regulation that prohibits sex-based discrimination in public schools and education programs that receive federal funding.
Which has, always been traditionally interpreted as meaning you can't keep girls out of educational opportunities. Stuff like that.
It was a landmark civil rights law when it was originally passed in 1972, and now, over 50 years later, it has become very controversial because of its recent ties to trans rights.
Yeah, that may be the one unbiased statement in this entire video.
The Obama administration sent out a guidance in 2016 announcing to schools that transgender students would be protected under Title IX.
It feels like they did this pretty quietly too, because I was actually pretty active in the RadFem community in 2016, and I did not hear anything about this at the time, which is sort of interesting.
And outlined how schools should treat their trans students in order to stay compliant. Then in 2017, the Trump administration said, delete that.
Right, and this is how the left is basically just handing an inevitable massive win to the right wing. Good job, guys.
Like, literally, they deleted the word gender from every government policy, effectively erasing any government recognition of trans people, including the protections that had been extended to us.
Because trans people don't need government protection. They are not real. Trans people are figments of their own imaginations.
But now, Biden has updated Title IX to include protections for trans people, not just with a guidance, but by amending the law to explicitly include sexual orientation and gender identity.
Which makes the sex characteristics null and void. It means that the sex characteristics don't actually matter, the gender identity supersedes them. Going by one overrides the other, or you wouldn't be doing it.
These changes go into effect on August 1st, meaning this upcoming school year will be the first where schools cannot purposely dead name, misgender, or force trans kids into the wrong bathroom without being in violation of Title IX.
That is exciting, isn't it? So that's why they had it roll out at the beginning of August, to coincide with the beginning of the new school year. The subtext of that targeting becomes horrifying when you remember that there are no trans kids.
However, it does not protect trans students in school sports.
It doesn't cover sports, which is interesting. It's like they threw the dog a bone or something. It's that thing bureaucrats do where they're trying to please everybody. That's how that reads to me. Because that's the one objection most people have. That's the objection shared by most people, is boys and girls sports is like, obviously, immediately dangerous.
And schools are also responsible for keeping their students compliant. So if a trans kid is being bullied for their identity and the school refuses to step in, that's also a violation of Title IX, and the school would be at fault.
And they could lose funding over stuff like that. But so the schools, which are already underfunded, are going to be responsible for enforcement of this. But compliance will presumably be judged somehow.
And refusal to comply would result in a loss of federal funding. And that's how you know shit's real. When you go after the money, then they start to listen. Similarly, the Biden administration updated Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, another non-discrimination statute, to also include protections for trans people within the healthcare system.
Okay, this is really interesting what they did to change the healthcare laws in the United States. Prohibited discriminations include denial of cross-sex hormones that trans people need but there are no trans people. Denial of fertility care for same-sex couples. Which, hooray for same-sex couples. Not everyone is entitled to children. And, I don't know, maybe adopt. It's not my business. On the other hand, if my tax money is going to go to paying for that stuff, what is this? There's no implication of this I can think of that doesn't turn my stomach. Same-sex couples do not have the ability to reproduce. There's no fertility treatment in the world that's going to fix that. Is there?
Such as protections for hormone therapy and surgery, and coverage for those things by insurance providers.
Verbal abuse, what was already against the rules? Directed at LGBTQ plus patients. Okay. That's very specific. So, misgendering, then. That means misgendering. It's officially against the law for your doctor to accurately observe your sex. Fun times. Turning away LGBTQ plus people in emergency situations because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. This should not happen to anyone, but I have heard many stories of this happening to people who have no insurance. The priorities of the Biden administration sure are interesting.
So, that's huge. Schools and healthcare have been two of the main targets of anti-trans legislation.
Schools and healthcare have certainly been two of the big battlegrounds in this whole culture war. That's true. I really just think that by ignoring material facts, the progressives are progressing their way right out of reality and therefore giving the right an inevitable win when material reality refuses to play along.
Most of which has passed while Biden has been in office, so why did it take them 4 years to fix what Trump fucked up in a month? I don't know.
Maybe because this nonsense isn't actually a priority of anybody who has any sense. One can hope.
Better late than never, though, so thanks, Joe. I'm trying to take the win, though Trump has already said that he's undoing all of this on day one if he gets elected, as well as just making transition illegal for everyone of all ages.
Once again, I find myself inclined to agree with something a right-wing figurehead is saying. That does not make me a Republican. It just makes them right about something for once. That just means that they are seeing that win and welcoming it with open arms, okay? This is not a left-right issue. This is not a progressive versus conservative issue. This is a material reality issue. And there's just no debate about it.
RIP. And as expected, red states are also fighting back against these protections, with more than 20 red states challenging the new Title IX rule, coming together to file at least 7 federal lawsuits so far, and several state officials have announced that they straight up refuse to comply with the new Title IX rule, no matter what. Win or lose, they'd rather throw away millions of dollars of federal funding to their state's education system than give rights to trans kids.
Oh yeah, because they can see this big win coming down the pike, and they're willing to sacrifice the funding for the education system they don't care about anyway.
Ryan Walters, the state superintendent of Oklahoma, who famously appointed Libs of TikTok to the state library committee, as in he put an actual anti-LGBT terrorist in charge of picking the books that kids can read, he had some things to say about the new Title IX rule.
President Biden deciding to rewrite Title IX is one of the most radical and illegal moves we've ever seen from the federal government. We are pursuing all actions to oppose this illegal and unconstitutional move. We have already instructed our districts to not comply. We will not allow boys in the girls' restrooms. We will not put boys in girls' sports.
Superintendent Ryan Waters looks like an idiot. He's so confident he didn't even bother to read this thing. Probably just like he didn't bother to look into Raya, whatever her name is, before he hired her. You know, birds of a feather flock together. What can you say?
As a coach and as a parent, I've watched young girls work to learn the lessons that come along with playing sports. And to see the federal government try to erase girls' sports is disgusting. And we will never allow Joe Biden to control our schools and indoctrinate our kids.
It's not radical, but it's extreme. It is extreme. It's extreme. This is an extreme move to enshrine in law the idea that gender identity, something that is completely internal and subjective and cannot be measured by any external forces, and is a symptom of something that is classified as a mental illness, is on par with material sex in determining things like educational and medical opportunities is absolutely ridiculous. That is an extreme position for the federal fucking government to take. And it's so aggravating to me. I'm not a conservative. Thanks for handing the right the win on this, you idiots. Thanks for giving the right the opportunity to claim that not only are they the sole proprietors of family values, they're also sole proprietorship of material fucking reality.
So I have a few notes. First of all, the updates to the Title IX rule don't include anything about trans sports. We talked about that earlier. And repeatedly calling trans rights unconstitutional is pretty rich coming from the guy that's forcing public schools to teach Christianity and requires a copy of the Bible in every classroom.
This is what I'm saying. I'm not a Christian conservative. I definitely don't think they need to be teaching Christianity in school. That's obviously unconstitutional for the exact point that Ty here is making. Good job, Ty. You brought it up to reinforce your own delusion, though, so points off there.
I don't recall reading about the gender binary in the Constitution, which makes sense because our founding fathers were rocking high heels and wigs, but they did have some pretty clear views on the separation of church and state.
Yeah, they did, but wasn't that a beautiful example of how misogynist societal creep works? Okay? High heels and wigs were masculine status symbols at the time, later adopted by women, which caused mainstream culture to abandon them as female-coded. Because mainstream culture hates anything to do with women. But you wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Ty?
As for the Affordable Care Act update, red states are again coming together to sue the Biden administration, claiming that this is the government forcing doctors to trans our children, which is obviously untrue, but being argued so loudly that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services updated their website to clarify that this is not happening.
Are they forcing children into gender transition? I don't know. Frankly, for the general argument, I hate to say this, it's kind of irrelevant. Allowing it is unethical, because allowing it is allowing a denial of material reality on the part of the individual undergoing this process, and that's not healthy. That is destructive, physically, mentally, emotionally. Do no harm.
It's not surprising that they'd be throwing a fit over this.
Throwing a fit, that's a really cute and dismissive way of characterizing anybody having a problem with mutilating and sterilizing mostly homosexual children.
But ultimately, it's not super necessary because even with these protections in place, it's really not hard to get an exemption. In the past, we've seen a Christian school violate Title IX under Obama, but then that school retroactively got exempt. With the argument being, well, we're a Christian school, so of course we're going to be homophobic. Students should just assume that before being gay at our school.
I don't know, that feels like whataboutism. So what about this? What are you guys even worried about? You'll just get exemptions, right? But like, homophobia is wrong and stupid. Do you like girls, Ty? Me too. Did you always like girls, Ty? Trans rights is just as homophobic as any Christian school ever was. And more effective at eradicating the problem.
So, yes, having anti-discrimination statutes for trans people in certain federally funded institutions is great. This is an important step forward. We do need these protections, but we shouldn't overestimate their power. But even if just symbolically, I think having the support of the current administration, getting these protections passed, making it known that they are on our side is huge.
Symbolically, this is not symbolic. That's federal law. And I'm suddenly moved to wonder the depth to which Ty really understands what she's talking about here. As a mom, this whole focus on children thing always concerns me because, as it's been said a million times, kids don't actually have the life experience to know themselves to that extent. They don't. And anybody who claims otherwise is selling something. Thank you so much for joining me out here in the garden tonight for a little visit with Ty Turner, the professional trans man.
And now, it's time to throw it over to our field correspondent for the weather.
I have been rad, Mom. Come back at the top of the hour for the live stream and discussion where we can dig into the trans rights versus right-wing issue a little more, because from the outside, it's all kind of starting to look similar. I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next time. Bye.